On July 15, 2026, Princess Leonor and Infanta Sofia walked through the ruins of a city that was already ancient when Rome was still a village. This was not a metaphor for some tabloid mystery. It is a literal description of where they spent that afternoon, the archaeological site of Empúries, on the Mediterranean coast of Catalonia, the only place on the entire Iberian Peninsula where the remains of both a Greek city and a Roman city sit side by side, layered into the same stretch of coastline. If you want to understand why this visit matters, and why it says something real about how the Spanish royal family is shaping the next generation, this is the story worth slowing down for. Start with the site itself, because Empúries is not just old, it is old in a way that reframes what ancient even means in a Spanish context. The Greek settlement here, called Emporion, was founded in 575 BC by settlers from Phocaea, a Greek city on the coast of what is now Turkey. That makes it older than the Roman Republic, older than most of what people typically associate with ancient Spain, predating even the Roman city that would later rise alongside it, Emporii. For centuries, this stretch of Catalan coastline was a genuine crossroads of the ancient Mediterranean world, a trading post where Greek merchants, and later Roman settlers, built a city that thrived, declined, and was eventually abandoned, buried, and largely forgotten until archaeologists began uncovering it in the modern era. Today, Empúries stands as the most important Greco-Roman archaeological site on the entire peninsula, not a reconstruction, not a museum exhibit, but the actual excavated remains of two civilizations that occupied the same ground centuries apart. This is where Leonor and Sofia spent their afternoon, and they were not there simply for a photo opportunity in front of old stones. The visit was part of the programming surrounding the 2026 Princess of Girona Awards, an initiative founded to recognize and support young people across Spain in fields ranging from science and the arts to social entrepreneurship and academic achievement. As part of that program, the two sisters were accompanied by young people participating in the Foundation's own youth initiatives, and once at the site, they toured the excavations in the northern section of the ancient Greek city alongside students enrolled in the 80th Empúries Archaeology course, a serious academic program built for upper-level undergraduate and graduate students of archaeology and history, not a casual tourist experience. Leonor and Sofia were not merely observing ruins. They were walking through an active academic dig site, meeting the next generation of Spanish archaeologists in the middle of their actual coursework. This detail matters more than it might first appear, because it fits a consistent pattern in how the Princess of Girona Foundation structures these public appearances. The foundation, established under Felipe when he was still Prince of Asturias, exists specifically to invest in young Spaniards, recognizing talent, funding opportunity, and increasingly, using royal visibility to elevate programs that might otherwise struggle for national attention. Pairing Leonor and Sofia with archaeology students at one of Spain's most significant excavation sites is not incidental programming. It is a deliberate statement, the future queen and her sister engaging seriously with Spanish cultural heritage and with the young academics working to preserve and understand it, rather than simply cutting a ribbon and moving on to the next stop. The Empúries visit did not happen in isolation. It came during an unusually active stretch of joint public engagements. For the two sisters this summer. The day before, Leonor and Sofia had attended the Princess of Girona Awards ceremony itself alongside their parents at the Gran Teatre del Liceu in Barcelona, one of Spain's most storied opera houses. And in the same cluster of appearances, the sisters carried out a separate, equally notable joint visit to Sant Martí Vell, a small medieval town in the same Catalan region, where they toured historic buildings restored by the late designer and philanthropist Elsa Peretti, and met with representatives from a support initiative launched for communities affected by the catastrophic Valencia floods of 2024, a program focused on education, youth entrepreneurship, mental health, and cultural development for young people navigating the aftermath of that disaster. Photographs from that visit show the sisters coordinating in matching pantsuits, touring the village together, Leonor at one point pointing something out to her younger sister as they walked. A small, unguarded gesture that Spanish outlets picked up on precisely because joint appearances like this between the two of them remain relatively rare. That rarity is worth naming directly, because it's part of why this summer stands out. For most of the past several years, Leonor and Sophia's public lives have run on almost entirely separate tracks. Leonor spent 3 years moving through military academies, the Army's General Military Academy in Zaragoza, the Naval Military School at Marin, and the Air and Space Academy at San Javier, a training pipeline that kept her largely isolated from ordinary public engagements and, notably, largely separate from her sister's own developing public role. Sophia, meanwhile, has been building her own presence more gradually, including a milestone public speech and her own visibility-building appearances tied to the Girona Foundation's youth programs. This summer represents one of the first extended windows where both sisters have been simultaneously free of major institutional obligations, Leonor between the end of military training and the start of university this September, Sophia on a break from her own studies, and the palace appears to be using that overlap deliberately, sending them out together for a run of joint engagements rather than scheduling them separately as usual. There is a broader institutional logic here worth drawing out, because it echoes something we've discussed before about how Zarzuela operates. This royal family, still working to rebuild public trust after the fallout from King Juan Carlos's exile, has consistently used visible substance, competence, discipline, genuine engagement with real issues, as its primary tool for legitimacy, rather than simply relying on inherited prestige. Sending the future queen and her sister to an active archaeological dig, to meet graduate students studying Spain's ancient past, to tour flood recovery programs in a small medieval town, is a quieter, less flashy version of that same strategy. It is not the kind of appearance built to dominate headlines. It is the kind built to slowly accumulate a track record, 2 young women who show up to serious places, engage with serious people, and treat their public role as substantive work rather than ceremonial appearance. There is also something worth noting about Empúries as a symbol, even if the palace never stated it explicitly. A city built by Greek traders, absorbed and rebuilt by Rome, eventually abandoned and buried by time, only to be painstakingly uncovered centuries later by people determined to understand what came before them. That is not a bad metaphor for an institution like the Spanish monarchy itself, which has survived dictatorship, exile, and cycles of declining public trust by continually rebuilding its own relevance. Whether or not that connection was intentional, it is hard not to notice Leonor, heir to a 900-year-old crown, walking through the excavated foundations of a city nearly 3,000 years old, on her way to a university career and a lifetime of public service that has not yet been written. What comes next for both sisters, at least for the remainder of the summer, appears to be more of the same: joint appearances tied to the Girona Foundation's youth initiatives, engagements rooted in substance rather than spectacle, and a visible, if quiet, signal from the palace that these 2 young women are being positioned not as competing figures but as a genuine team heading into the next phase of their public lives: Leonor toward university and an eventual throne, Sophia building her own independent public identity alongside her. A transparency note for accuracy: the July 15, 2026 visit to Empúries, its founding in 575 BC by Phocian Greek settlers, the accompanying archaeology students, the Princess of Girona Awards ceremony at the Grand Teatre del Liceu, and the joint visit to San Martí Vell including the Valencia flood recovery program are all drawn from verified press and foundation reporting. The interpretive framing connecting the site's history to the monarchy's own institutional trajectory is this script's own commentary, not a claim made by the palace or any source.